Hi everyone, welcome to the second part of today, assignment 1, overview. Uh, Normally we might do this in week 1, but we didn't want to just jam things down your throat, and to be honest with you, it's an extremely digestible specification to understand, so I'm going to kind of just skim through it and we can answer a few questions that many of you will have. At a high level, it's really straightforward. It's a 15% assignment due at the start of week 4 that is made up of 4 questions. It's the crux of it. 4 questions, 15% of the course, start of week 4. We'll touch on that some more later. Now, this assignment, for about 80% of it, maybe like 70% of it, is just getting HTML and CSS pages to look how you want them to look. Now, why are we exploring this as an idea? Just like we did in the demo lecture. Oops, sorry. Why does this matter? A common question we get is people saying, oh, this feels finicky and I don't know if I'd do this in the real world. Sometimes you do. It's not something you do very often, but what's really important is that the way that we feel that you can best quickly upskill in these areas is by having to really play around and feel the code and how these properties affect things. Sometimes in industry these days, you won't actually do a ton of CSS writing because you'll actually be given CSS by designers and their tools. But we don't want you to skip this important kind of more fundamental understanding of, I guess, I don't want to call it the science, but, you know, I guess the base technology. So it's some blah, blah, blah. Now, there are 4 tasks. Task 1, 2, and 3 are pretty much HTML, CSS, and task 4 is JavaScript. So when you look at this assignment, you can honestly just be like, task 1, 2, and 3 over here, task 4 over here. Task 4 is very different. We'll get to that in a bit. Task 1, 2, and 3 are just go and build this page. Go and do what we did in the demo lecture. Make a page, make it look like this, and then you're done. Task 1 is just this image here. It's from a certain website. I've gone and changed a bunch of the text. That's why the text is so stupid, because I wrote it. But we're essentially saying open up a file, and inside, you can actually see it. Inside the task 1 folder, there's a file called index.html that's blank. So we're saying go to that file and go and write some HTML and CSS that make it look like this. So the only the only interesting things about that are, if you want to add CSS in an external file, that's okay. In fact, we've kind of set that up for you already, where we've got this file. Oh, no, we didn't. Sorry, I thought we did. You can actually go and make another file called, styles.css or index.css or something. And the assets that are on that page, which in this case is just the hands, we give that to you too. So everything else on that page you should be able to completely make with just HTML and CSS, whereas that's just an image that you can include, right? Pretty straightforward page. Good job, Reese. Today my ticket was actually fixing up the padding that was off-centering something. Excellent. That's, I assume Reese is talking about at work, at a job. Number 2, task 2 is a responsive static page. This is very similar to task 1. In fact, if you just look at this, it's identical to task 1 in the sense that you are just coming along and making a page look like this. The 11 assets on this page are given to you as well. I'm going to open up a second copy of this. The 11 assets on the page are given to you as well, right here. All right, there's a bunch of icons. These icons are SVGs. SVGs are very easy to work with, but if you're not feeling particularly comfortable with SVGs, you can actually go and have a look at one of the extra lectures on SVGs here. It's a great lecture by Michelle, a prior COMP6060 tutor who now works at Canva. But to be honest, if you're not actually interested in learning more about them, you could probably get using them very quickly just by quick Google. So if you're just trying to use them and you're busy and, learning deep is a priority for next week or never, just Google it was probably best. The interesting thing about this page, though, is that we want it to work for both this size, 1200 pixels, and this size down here, which is 857 pixels. Now, I've intentionally tried to keep this very simple, right? In the sense that there is nothing kind of crazy about these two designs except the page is shrunk in a little bit or not. Now, we've just done that in the demo lecture, in the previous lecture, right? Where I showed you how you can make a flex and it can get a bit bigger and smaller. You don't have to worry about what happens if it's smaller than that or if it's bigger than the big one. It's just between those two states. Now, what you aren't allowed to do, and this is written in the spec, is you aren't allowed to go pick an exact size 1200 and make it look exactly like this, and then pick an exact size 870 or whatever and make it look like that. We actually want to see that if we drag the browser window, right, and just to be really clear, we want to see that if we drag the browser window like this, see how that changes between these two sizes? The boxes get smaller and bigger. That's what we expect here. We don't expect it to just like snap to another size. That's not what the aim of that exercise is. So, that one's just a lot of fine styling and adding images. Again, pretty okay. In fact, in some ways, I wouldn't say it's easier than that. It's easy too. I think both of them, they take a little bit of time. For a typical student, they would take anywhere between 20 minutes to 4 hours, depending on the roadblocks you find and all the other hiccups, right? The average student, I think that might take them a couple of hours to get right. Like a lot of things, you're going to spend a lot of time on a very small part of it, because there's going to be something that's going to stump you, something small. And that's okay. Just be like, that's okay. This is going to happen. This happens sometimes. Some stuff's easier than it should be. Some stuff's harder than it should be. That's just life. So that's part 2. Very, very similar, identical. Part 3 is the same thing as part 2, except it's a lot more responsive, and there's a lot more intricate elements. So task 3 or part 3, what did I call it? Task 3 is kind of the harder CSS stuff. It's very similar to the other 2 tasks in that it's just a page with text and other stuff. Oh, by the way, all the text and stuff on these pages I went and put in a text file for you, so you don't have to type it out. You can just go and like copy and paste it, because I like you, I guess. I do. So we've got these like 3 things here, and you can see it's a little bit weird. We've got this like vertical line here, and there's like text at all different sizes, and there's like a 19 with a small dollar and a small month and tick and colors, and there's like a drop down too. So this one's meant to kind of test your ability to do more intricate things. We don't expect all students to get all of this right, because it's starting to get a bit more difficult. But the key things here are all the different text sizes and text colors. There's the drop down. There's this funny little icon up here as well. And what I've gone and done is, if you go and have a look at all these different pages in task 3, I've actually given you some kind of screenshots of what they should all look like oh, that's okay, at different sizes. So here I can see like I've got the page at its max width and its minimum width. So that's the smallest we'll ever look at your page through that kind of size, and the biggest we'll look at it's through that. And then I also gave you a couple of interim ones, which is like, I called them max, high, low, and min. So it's like, now we have our like, let me put these in order for you. So it's kind of like, it's like that. See, it's like that, and as it gets a bit smaller, everything compresses in a bit. As it gets smaller again, it snaps, hint, hint, for those live. I'm sure you remember us talking about that recently. It snaps to this, and then it just keeps getting smaller. I spend a lot of time looking for pages that I like. I'm really sorry about names. Is it G Quinn? Apologies if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. I'll try and do better. Will the background color be given? I'll chat about that in a second. It's a good question. I'm sure someone else will answer it in the chat too. But task 3 is essentially making this page look like this, but for the different sizes. Now, truly, probably most of the difficulty in this is actually getting it to look like that. I won't lie, the responsive element of this is actually pretty easy. Like a lot of this is kind of just, if you define the flex properly, it just kind of works. And this, if you get the breakpoints correctly, it also just kind of works. I have given the hint in the spec, though, that it's reasonable to assume that to get those breakpoints working, you have to duplicate HTML. Just as a heads up. That's totally normal thing to do. So don't be like, oh my god, how do I change the HTML page? It's actually kind of normal to just totally duplicate it. In fact, this is what the website I stole this from did it. I know that because what happened was I went and changed all the text on this page, and then when I resized it, I took a screenshot of it and all the text was wrong. And I was like, oh my god, what went wrong? And I realized it's because I changed the text on the bigger one, not on the smaller one. Actually, and just as a really quick tangent, let's say I wanted to go and steal something from UNSW site for an assignment. There's a really cool trick you can do in DevTools. Go watch the DevTools lecture first. Let me make this really big. But if you actually go look at your HTML page and you go and add, you can just double click on this up here. If you go and add the phrase content editable and you hit enter, the way a lot of browsers are built is you can actually go and click on the text and go and change it. Hard to get to when trains are not working. And there's your new website. Go and change this. You got to be careful though, because if you click a link, it takes you to that link. Portrait of young woman. I know this person. I think I will message them after this and tell them that that they're a portrait of young woman. Reese has a good question. Will I need to know HTML and CSS to this extent for the next 2 assignments? So for the next 2 assignments, you need to use HTML and CSS, but we don't actually tell you what to do. Like we just say go and make a nice site. So you need to use it to make it look nice, but you're kind of driving the car. Like you're setting the standard. It's not like this is how it needs to look. Go make it look like this. So this kind of assessing and learning outcome of trying to get you to control things quite specifically is the main learning outcome of assignment 1. It's not something that creeps up in the other assignments. There's some more detail here. You can go read through it. I really like a question that Joseph's asked, which is, are those tabs clickable? Right? So you look up here and you see these tabs. So unless I've told you that something has a dynamic behavior, everything's static. And what I mean by that is if you actually go look at the spec, there's a little list here that says, it says you'll need to, yes, you will need to go click through the 3 tabs because it says so. It says you'll need to use JavaScript to swap between the 3 tabs. It says when transitioning from wide view to narrow, you must do this with CSS. That's how most of you know how to do it. That's actually just to stop some smarty pantsers doing it another way. You must ensure that the start free trial button has a slightly different color when you hover over it. So I've gone and actually in the designs, I think, where have I done it? I think there's like a hover. I did it in one of these screenshots. You can actually see that the button there is a bit darker than here. It's probably like a bit of an optical illusion, but yeah, see, it's a little bit darker when you hover over it. So I've specified that when you hover over it has a slightly different color. And then I said when the drop down is clicked, it should display the drop down like this. So when you click on that drop down, it actually should pop down and display stuff. Now, just to be really clear, I have to say this to all students these days. Please don't absolutely hate yourself if you can't do everything. Like we literally, I won't go on a big rant about it because it's Monday night, but these assignments are very different from your other uni assignments because you know if you've done it right to an extent. Like you've either done it or you haven't. There's no like you've done it but you got it wrong. Like if you've done it, you've got it right. So therefore you can't look at this thing to the same extent of saying, like if everyone in this course finished this assignment completely, you'd all get 100%, right? So like what happens in a normal exam is that the better prepared or the smarter or not an exam, but like a normal assessment, the better prepared or the harder working or the more intelligent students tend to get things done quicker, which gives them more time to go and solve more complex problems so that they get a higher mark. It's exactly the same here. So, if you aren't like an HD student or you don't aspire to be, then it's going to be very normal for you to say, get this page working like this, but maybe you won't have the drop down working. Maybe you won't have the tab part done, but you'll get most of it done. So don't let task 1 and 2, which I think all of you should be able to do pretty comfortably, don't let that kind of set a tone and put too much pressure on yourself. Because some of you some of you should expect yourself to do all of this. Some of you shouldn't, you know. I was like a 72 WAM student. Like, it's okay. I hate the thought of everyone in this course beating themselves up for not being perfect, because you've all got very complex lives with lots going on and other courses, and don't look at 60/80 in a vacuum and be like, I should be perfect. You know, just try and be the best you can be across everything. You don't need a philosophical rant tonight. The one thing I want to point out, though, is you'll notice this question says you'll need basic JavaScript usage for tasks to do the 3 tabs thing. It's pretty simple, actually. Like, it's actually very, very simple once you know what to do. Task 4 is all JavaScript. Well, actually, sorry. It's a little bit of HTML because we ask you to build this form, but it's actually like no CSS. It's actually really, really straightforward HTML. So task 4 requires JavaScript. A tiny part, literally like 2%, 1% maybe of task 3 requires JavaScript. If you go look at the course structure, you'll see that you start learning a bit about JavaScript this week, and then next week you learn a lot about JavaScript. So, as I said in my notice, how you should approach this assignment is that you go do task 1, 2, and like 99% of 3 this week for Monday. Like, you should be here next Monday having done task 1, 2, and 3. And you should be ready to start thinking about assignment 2. Thinking about it. You don't have to start, but like, get your head into gear. You want the weekend between week 3 and week 4 to be about assignment 2, predominantly, if you can. If you can't, that's fine. But like, that's my recommendation. Task 4 is not too bad. And in fact, a lot of task 4 is kind of training for assignment 2. One of the reasons that task 4 is here, and let me explain, is because assignment 2 is challenging. And it's all about doing task 4 at a big scale. It's really just task 4, but like really big. If we don't put a little bit of JavaScript in assignment 1, what happens is that a lot of students, whether I like it or not, they finish assignment 1 and then assignment 2 is due in week 7. So they don't really start assignment 2 till like flex week, and then it's already kind of too late, and then they're still trying to learn fundamental stuff. So what task 4 does is it kind of, I really hate approaching it like this, but like, I'm a realist again. It gives you an incentive to have to learn really critical concepts for assignment 2 early on in the course, so that when you start assignment 2, you're like, oh, I actually really get the fundamentals of this now, and you don't feel blocked. Because you know how hard assignments are, right? The hardest part's starting. You're just like, I don't really know how to start. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll go watch some more Brooklyn Nine-Nine or something, right? Whatever you're watching at the moment. So that's why it's here, and it's meant to be fun. It's meant to give you a real taste of what real web development is like, and hopefully it's a nice break from all the HTML and CSS that by this point you're probably like, I never want to touch CSS again. Task 4 is a simple HTML page where we ask you to essentially generate different outputs in this box based on different inputs up here. So some inputs will lead to some outputs, and vice versa. So it's really just about making things dynamic on the web page. There's a whole bunch of rules listed down here, like here's the page, and these are the actions that can occur, and this is what renders when those things happen. So it's all spelled out there for you. It's and again, just to be clear, you probably want to get to this lecture. So once you watch the events lecture, you can finish off that last part of it. Just to be clear, every time I always get a message from a student in my experience that says like, don't release assignments with content that we haven't covered yet, and it's like, I don't know how to avoid that. Like, it's just like uni assessment. We can't just not expect anything from you for like 3 weeks, otherwise everything else gets really hard. But also, again, this assignment's structured in a way that you're never blocked, right? Like, if you are one of the students who has literally done task 1, 2, and 3 already, and you're like, I want to do task 4, but I can't because I haven't learnt it yet. It's like, go watch the video. It's right here. You can go watch it anytime. Totally up to you. You actually don't need me. You could literally just do it all now and finish it. Don't need me at all. So, some questions. Reese says, I haven't finished task 2 completely and I never want to touch CSS again. Nearly there, Reese. Everyone give a big supportive clap for Reese. Sunny says, I just wanted to clarify that we should be able to alternate between bachelor, master's, and doctorate in the wide view as well. Great question. I don't think that's very clear in the spec. I'm going to make a note of that and update that. COMP6080 tabs only, swap in mobile view. Thank you, Sunny. It's a new assignment. I do a new one every term. You only have to click the tabs on the mobile view. You don't have to worry about this. That would honestly be like a nightmare of CSS. I wouldn't wish that upon my darkest enemy. Not that there are tabs there, but you can imagine if you wanted that blue thing. Don't want to think about it. So yeah, it's just on this. It's actually really, really, really simple once you get it. So I could have also not included it, but I thought it'd be a little bit fun. It's honestly like, if you don't do it, I can't even imagine how little of a mark it's going to be. Like if you don't do the tab, like I could kind of figure it out. I might guess that it's like, what, like, let's just call it, I don't know, worst case, like 5% of the visual compliance, which is a lot. So it's like you got 5% of the visual compliance. Visual compliance is half the marks of a 4-part question of a 15%. I did the math wrong. It's like so small. I reckon it would be lost in a rounding error. So don't stress about it. Louis says, since there's no CSS, I don't think you need to worry about making them look the same. Correct. Azam says, how long should tasks 1, 2, and 3 take an average student? It's such a hard question. I want to answer it, and I'll do my best, but it's really hard because people are different. And I see this all the time. Like, I went and compared a lot of my marks from like COMP6771 to COMP6080, 2 programming level 6 courses, and some students were like consistently at the top, some were consistently at the bottom, some did really poorly in one and really great in another, really great in one, really poorly in another. It really depends on your personal background and experience and intellect. But task 1, 2, and 3, I don't know, maybe like a day. But it's hard because like this is the challenging thing, right? When you say how long should tasks 1, 2, and 3 take an average student, you're essentially saying how long does it take an average student to finish everything perfectly, which is like asking me how long would it take an average student to get 100% on an assignment. That's kind of the hard element of the question, if I'm making sense. But I would say like your average student could get an average mark on tasks 1, 2, and 3 with I don't know, like depends how many tutes they've done. Like, God, it's really hard. Because, like, if there's someone who's just tried to go at it without, like, doing some tute questions, like, a dozen or more hours, if they've kind of gone and done the tute questions and practiced on them, then it's probably, like, 3 times quicker. So it's really, really hard to answer. But, I don't know, a couple of, 3 or 4 evenings, maybe? I'm not sure. It's honestly so dependent. Tim says, had a course recently where the course didn't cover content required for the assignments until after the assignments were due. Yeah, that's just silly. It's the life. Jimmy says, so the tab stuff is part of the marking criteria. Well, we specify in the spec you will need to use basic JavaScript for this task to swap between the 3 tabs. I'll go and extend upon that, mobile only, later tonight. But all of this forms part of the visual criteria. Now, usually a question I get from students is like, what specifically makes up that 50%? Well, it's like a whole bunch of little things. Typically what we do with tutors is we kind of just say to them, if there's a few things wrong, you take off a tiny bit of marks. If there's like many things wrong, you take off many more. But the reason it's very open-ended is actually to be nicer to you, because what it allows you to do is like, the problem when you have really specific criteria, like this is correct in 50 things, is that it's really hard then if a student gets like all of these little things mostly okay, because then you have to kind of give them like a 0 for it. Because often if you break things up, you have to just give 0s or 1s. There's a whole bunch of educational theory behind it, but between that binary nature of it. But essentially it's kind of so that we can be more lenient, and so that if you kind of do everything half okay, we can still give you like the equivalent of the marks, whereas checklists can be somewhat inhibiting there. But it's honestly a very easy, like the average mark in this assignment is like 87 or something. So like, and that means that like if you most people are kind of just fine, so you don't need to totally destroy yourself. Reese says, if it helps, I'm a very slow worker on assignments. Task 1 took me 3 hours and task 2 around 4 to 5. Yeah, very slow worker on assignments. Like, that all sounds fine. William says, I took half a day to do task 1. Just means you're learning, William. Like, I don't mean that rudely. I don't know how I could mean that rudely. I mean that, like, sincerely. Like, if it took you that long, you've definitely learned something in the process. Serena says, for task 2, there is a red underline under the word to do's. I think I put that in the spec. There we go. No, you do not need to worry about the red underline. Great. One step ahead for once. I'm glad I didn't miss that one. It's a great question, though. Serena says, I think this... Okay, everyone's answering that question. Mitchell says, for future assignments, can we use libraries like Tailwind? Yes, so what actually happens is that in assignment 2 and assignment 3, you actually get to use libraries that do a lot of CSS for you. So if you go and watch like the Using CSS Frameworks lecture, there's some stuff there where you actually see that you can use frameworks to actually kind of like use off-the-shelf CSS. So it's kind of like, instead of making your own bread, you can just buy some bread from the store. Because like, if you think about, to carry that analogy further, if I told you right now to make a sandwich, it's kind of the equivalent of baking your own bread and like getting your own, like roasting your own meat and making your own cheese. And like assignment 2 is very much about go buy some bread, go buy some cheese, just put it together, because we're going to focus on JavaScript in assignment 2. So you will do CSS and HTML for assignment 2, but it will be substantially less painful, very little expectations, etc., etc., etc. Yes. But yeah, like, and just let me keep chatting about this quickly because we're consuming quite a lot of time. Some other notes at the bottom. There's some helpful tips. I think this was back to a question I got asked earlier about knowing the colors. I gave you some information about how to find sizes of things and colors of things. Try and do all your development on Chrome, or at least when you're finished, check it on Chrome, because we're going to mark it on Chrome. You can't use any external libraries like CSS or JavaScript libraries. Basically, all the code that's submitted will be your code, is the short answer. Like, all of it will be stuff written by you, literally. In terms of the marking criteria, only half of the marks are actually for how it looks or operates. So if it does what it's meant to or looks how it's meant to, that's half the marks. The other half of the marks are the quality of your code. And this is kind of covered in various lectures, even today a little bit when I've been talking about naming and using the descendants versus all children, how to put like styles on each line, all these little things. Tutors, again, they're trying to mark this stuff quickly, right? Tutors kind of generally operate under a model of you've done it right and they're looking for you to make big screw ups. So if they glance at your stuff and it looks fine, they're really happy to kind of often give you marks. But half of it comes from code quality. This is unlike assignments 2 and 3 where we won't look at your code quality. We think it's too much in the later assignments to expect you to do all these things and to write perfect code. So in this assignment, this is where we spend some time really trying to get you to do things, write nice code. It's due Monday, March 7th. Please read the instructions. Please read the thing about submitting to the terminal. You have to push to GitLab and you have to run this on a CSE machine. Don't be one of those people that misses that command. There's always a student every term who gets 0 because they didn't submit it correctly. At the very least, make sure it's on GitLab, please. Like, if you really screw up the second step, I can work around it with you. But if you screw up the first step and you say my code's still on my computer, it's just impossible for us to tell if you faked it. I believe you, don't get me wrong, but I have to answer for what happens when someone from the top comes in and says, "How did you let that happen?" So try and keep an idea of that. Yeah, that was a very unattractive thumbnail for using CSS frameworks. I know, I look like a goblin. I'm just kidding. I know you were talking about the text. It's very funny though, isn't it? I really need to update some of these thumbnails. Xander says, would I be able to get a hint about how to do the dots between the words? Yeah, that's a great question, Xander. So in task 2.1, there's some dots. You can do dots a couple of ways. There's probably an HTML entity for dot, I'm guessing. Yeah, you can just use some of these. Like if you just, I'll show you. It's like actually really easy. There's a bullet. If I just go and like paste that here. Oh, not there. Maybe like H1 at the end. Oh, I closed the page, did I? Oh no, it's here. What the hell? Why is that not working? Why is the background still happening? I don't know what I've done wrong. Oh, is it just too big? I don't know. Does anyone else have any genius ideas of what I've done wrong here? The middle dot's fine. I don't know. Oh, it looks like some HTML parsing or something. Oh, did I get rid of the style tag? Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's a dot there. That's actually treated as a font, like a font element. And you can see like Louis and Vanessa have shared things as well. You can actually just copy. It's a character. It's a character in the Unicode set or whatever the hell it is. I can't remember what it's called. It's a Unicode character. It's literally like an ASCII character in the big world of... ASCII's like a tiny little character set. And the real world you have Unicode or UTF-8 or... I'm not a Unicode expert. So, but there's lots of easy ways to do things like that too. Sunny says, just on code quality, should it be fine to have inline styling if we wanted to add to some styling from a class? I don't know what you mean. Should it be fine to have inline styling if we wanted to add on to some styling from a class? Oh, sure. So in this assignment, we've been pretty clear that we pretty much just don't want to see inline styles. Your tutor will probably look over one or two, but again, it's all about just kind of setting a standard, conveying good practices. So in assignment, in future stuff, yeah, that's kind of reasonable. But for the sake of the first assignment, no, we want to have it all separated out. I don't think there's a requirement that the CSS has to be in a separate file. I think it just has to be like separated out. Let me check. Let me just Google file. I don't think we say that, but it has to be at least separated out to what we've done here. Though honestly, putting it in another file can sometimes be just a little bit easier to read and clean. But again, just to be clear, if I would do this, I would go do everything in line, and then I would go pull it up the top once it feels a little bit crazy, and then once I'm happy with it, I'd go put it in another file. So don't feel like you have to like write code perfectly. You just kind of have to submit perfect. Perfect's a bit dramatic. You don't have to write code well. You just have to submit good code. You can write code poor and refactor it if you want to. Like, it's the first time you're working on this. We don't expect it to just be like amazing and I'm gonna do it. And even then, you don't write code that way a lot of the time because you're kind of hacking away at it. Jimmy says, what about setting font family as a style on body tag? Well, you can do that like I did up here, like this, just with the body tag. It's just kind of easier for us to say there's no exceptions. In reality, I'm sure you could pick out a few examples, but it's just for communication and simplicity, and it doesn't really add that much pain to people's lives either. So, like for to keep it really simple with the ruling, we're saying it just keeps everything cleaner for people. It's 7:53. We have spent a lot of time talking tonight. I'm sorry about that. Hope it's been somewhat interesting. Nonetheless, that's pretty much it for assignment 1. I think I've covered the basics of it. The other reason assignment 1's like this is because it actually relies on very little assumed knowledge. And this is designed so that you don't feel like you're drowning in theory. Late enrollment people don't feel like they've missed a dozen hours of complicated lectures. It's just a chance for you to sit down and focus, hone your skills. Not worth a ton of an assignment, and yeah. So in summary, get started. Try and finish task 1, 2, and 3 by the end of this weekend, so that next week you can just finish off task 4. And if you really try hard, like, you can think about task 4 as the beginning of assignment 2. So just to really summarize it, it's like you want to get yourself in a position where coming Monday next week, where we're going to start talking about JavaScript in a demo, you're just thinking about JavaScript from week 3 for like many weeks. You know, you kind of want to get HTML and CSS out of the way this week to really free up your brain for JavaScript and swinging into the second assignment. Remember, this is a big project course. It's a small exam. All right, well, I don't see any other questions. It's 7:55, so let's wrap it up there. Hope that was a good introduction to assignment 1.